Welcome back, my friends, to the I Was Born to Do This podcast. I am your host, Kara Brinton, and it is my deepest honor and joy to create this space for our beautiful authors at JOA Publishing to come in and talk about their books and talk about the work that they're here to do in the world, the work that they were born to do. And today we have the beautiful and talented Amber Arrington on the show. Amber, thank you for being here.
I'm so happy to be here with you today. Thanks for having me.
Of course. It's always so fun to see your beautiful face. I have such a love for you. We've walked this path for a while now, and I love that we're sitting here talking about your book, talking about the work that you are here to do. So why don't you tell us, first of all, the book that you wrote?
My book is called, it's right there, Not Atypical Motherhood. It's the guide for navigating a child's new autism diagnosis.
Can you grab it? Can you grab it and show us so that those who watch this recording can see how beautiful it is?
Oh, this is her.
We
have the infinity symbol on the cover just because the infinity symbol is leading the way as the symbol for autism. So yeah, the cover turned out so beautiful.
I love the cover. It also has such a comforting calmness to it. I feel like when I look at it, I feel calm. And I would imagine that those who need this book probably don't feel calm when they are in that space of life, right?
Absolutely. Most of them do not feel calm.
So why don't you talk to me about who needs this book?
So I wrote this book for this specific moment in time where the parent is essentially leaving a doctor's office with a new autism diagnosis in hand for their child. And in that moment, all they know is my child's autistic, and that's might be all they know. And then they have what the world's narrative about autism is, which is not inherently positive. And so that person is feeling so scared, so much fear, confusion. They're paralyzed. They don't know what to do next. And that's who this book is for.
And it feels as though this is what I'm feeling right now. And you can tell me if this is true. But it feels as though there are so many who are leaving doctors' offices right now with this diagnosis, and that they've just entered like walking on like glass. Like no one told them to put their shoes on. Like no one prepped them for what they were going to go through. And so they keep getting cut, and it just feels like they can't get ahead. Would that kind of explain how they feel when they leave? Talk to me about how that moment is for them.
I think that's a good analogy. I actually used an analogy in the beginning of the book where we're just going to call her a mom because that's what I am and that's who I generally speak to. She is in the middle, like she just got dropped into the desert with no shoes on, with no sunscreen, with no umbrella. She's just in the middle of the desert and she feels like she's completely alone. So yeah, I think that was a good like visual, but yeah, that's what it feels like. But what she doesn't know is if she can just get over the hill, there's actually like a whole army of support waiting there for her. And she just doesn't know about it yet. And that's what I seek to do also with the book, is just like to help her know, like, I know you're scared. I know you don't know a lot yet, but I'm going to help you know everything high level that you need to know right now so you can begin asking the right questions, seeking the right support, and realizing that this is not actually something that you need to be so scared about.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I love that analogy and the visualization, and just knowing, it's so much easier to do something when you know, oh, if I could just go one more mile, right? And like on my hardest days, I have to be like, hey, can you just like do 5 more minutes to this spot? Can you do 10 more minutes to this spot, right? And there's like something where like if we know around that corner, there's the thing that we've been needing. And I love that your book is actually that. It's like the guidepost that says, hey, let me help you. Instead of you just, I would imagine it would be easy if I were dropped in the middle of the desert with nothing. It would be easy to just actually sit down and be like, why would I even walk?
Take a nap. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, well, I'm going to die anyways, so might as well just sit down. Right.
That's what it feels like. And that's what a lot of mamas do. I didn't realize this because I feel like when something hard happens, whatever kind of hard it is, we tend to handle it in one of two ways. Like we tend to, one, leap into action and bury any emotions with the action to try and fix, to try and remedy, to try and try to feel like you're in control of the situation. Or we shut down and we fall into depression. We just sleep if we can. There's these two camps, and I just happen to be in the camp of action. But I know there's a lot of moms that are paralyzed. Yeah. And they just are like, I don't even have anything to give to try to figure this out. And so I like to try to support both with wherever they're at and just pick them up and say, all right, this is your next step.
Which I think is so powerful. I would love for you to share. I know we kind of jumped straight in, but we'll see where I would love to talk about you writing the book. But before we get there, this seems so loud to just dive here. Is what would you tell a mom who just found out that her child has autism? What do you teach in the book that you could teach them right now?
I really like to focus on autism is not an emergency. It's not the emergency that you might feel like it is. Obviously, it's something that needs our attention, but you can take your time and slow down for a minute until you are grounded again. Because there's going to be maybe doctors or professionals telling you, you need to throw your kid in this or that. They need 40 hours of this. They need that. You might just believe the first thing anybody tells you. And I think it's really important to realize it's not an emergency. An autism diagnosis, it's not the final verdict of their future. It's not 100% indicator of what they will accomplish in their life. And it's okay to pause and just research a little bit, ideally with the help of a tour guide like myself, so that the fire hose of information is not affecting you so greatly out on Google and Facebook groups, but take your time, take a pause. It's okay if it takes you a few weeks or a few months to figure out how to dial in what your next step is. And it's also okay if you do nothing, because an autism diagnosis doesn't mean that you have to do something about it. And so I just think it's important for moms to know these things in the very beginning.
What I can only imagine the relief that brings to a mom.
Yeah.
Just knowing that, hey, this is an emergency, because it does feel like the trauma is in that experience of this is an emergency. And then everything gets turned to fight and flight. And then your nervous system gets wrecked. And you're also trying to navigate raising this child. Talk to me about your journey. Talk to me about why is this the book that you wrote, and why you know what you know?
Well, I guess this is a good place to say this is not the book that I meant to write right now. I found myself through what I consider divine something that led me precisely to this moment where I ended up in a mastermind of women who were all writing books. And I intended to write a book about how it took us 20 years to build our family through IVF and adoption. And I got a couple months into that mastermind and I was like, I don't want to write that book right now. But I'm supposed to write a book. So what else do I know a lot about? Well, at that point, I have 3 autistic children out of my 6. And I thought, well, I know a little bit about autism. So let me just write a handbook about autism for parents, which is essentially what I did. But as I got into this book and wrote it inside of 3 months, by the way, with the help of yours truly, as I was doing my research and the pieces that weren't about my personal journey, I ended up, this book was nothing like I thought it would be. I ended up learning so much that helped heal my soul, that helped me understand the reality of autism. And this book did a lot to change me. And so then I ended up with this book about autism. That's how I got there.
Wow. Yeah. I remember this. I remember you coming into the mastermind. I remember the book that you were going to write. And then I remember when this one showed up. And it was like, oh my gosh, this is the book you're here to write. It's not the book you thought, but it's the book that needs to come out. And I think it's very divine that you have 3 children who have autism, because I'm sure every one of them is different, which allows you to see through the eyes of multiple mothers.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what the question that you asked me that I didn't answer was, what was it like for me to have, essentially have 3 autistic children? And the thing that's unique about my journey is I have a 20-year-old autistic son, but I also have at this point 3.5 and 5-year-old autistic little girls. So it's something that I have been navigating for 20 years already. It's also something that I am currently navigating daily. And also, just because your son is 20 doesn't mean that they don't need you involved in their life on a regular basis, because that still is the case. And the way I felt about each of their diagnoses was different depending on the situation. When my oldest son was diagnosed, that didn't happen officially till he was 12 years old. And so I was relieved to finally have that diagnosis in hand and realize what we were dealing with. Trying to piece that all together for 12 years was so crazy. Now, when Mallory comes along, my miracle baby that I wait 20 years to have, autism is nowhere on the horizon of what I suppose happens after a 20-year-old miracle comes along. And that one really took the wind out of me. And that was really hard to cope with. When my baby ends up with a diagnosis, I call it an accidental diagnosis. It wasn't an accident, but she was hitting her milestones, and I didn't think she was autistic. And it's the story, it's all in the book. But the way that happened, I guess I leaned into that pretty quick, because I was like, well, we know what to do with autism. And if I have this diagnosis for her so early, it will only help her. I know how to get her supports now, and she's absolutely thriving. So, but it's just really interesting how you can have different emotions about that diagnosis depending on what's going on, and all emotions are okay.
Yeah. Oh, wow. My heart is just, I can feel the relief this conversation is going to be for many. Because I think with anything, anytime we feel alone, everything feels harder. And you just sharing your stories, and then you writing this book, and then you've created a membership for people. You're annihilating the belief that we're alone, which is half the battle.
Yeah. Well, I hope so.
That's the best gift. It's the best gift that you've created.
Well, because most autism moms of autistic children really do feel alone. And even if they have a really loving partner, even if they have an awesome mom or dad in their life that are really supportive in lots of ways, even if they're that lucky, and not everybody is, you still feel alone, because nobody gets raising an autistic child the way another parent raising an autistic child does. You just don't have a place with people with typical children. So that is super important.
It is. And I would love for you to share with us about your membership, because, you and I are similar in the sense of my deepest belief is to eradicate people feeling alone. And, in my way, I have a network of leaders, because leaders feel alone a lot. And so I have an actual network where leaders come in, and it's let's clear out this belief that you're alone, and let's band together. And you've done this for parents who have children who have autism. And so I love this. And I think this is the thing that's missing. It's not getting into a Facebook group where everyone's sharing their problems and you don't leave feeling uplifted. It's being in a community that sees you, hears you, knows you. And I know that that's who you are. So tell us about this membership.
Sure. So I wanted to create something special that didn't exist. Community is a piece of it for sure. But there are so many parents that are struggling to get, they're waiting 1 to 2 years or more just to get a diagnosis. They're stuck waiting. Or they're stuck waiting for their appointment, for services, essentially. They're stuck waiting. Some parents can't access services at all. They don't have insurance, or they're in a rural location. They're in another country, and they can't even get support for their child. So I was like, how can I help solve some of these problems? That's why I created the Infinity Mom Club. So it is a community, but it's also a place for education and resources. Now, here's the problem. Education and resources sounds elusive. Like, moms want to, but what do I get? Like, why do I need that? You know, I created a place where we could come in and yes, we can have conversations, we can vent, we can ask questions. Like, there's a beautiful forum type feature that's kind of like Facebook in there. But then like I have a resources section in there categorized for information about like state disability agencies, for example, resources for speech therapy, resources about facilitated communication, like books to read, podcasts to listen to, just so like it's easily attainable information. But then we bring in experts at least once a month. So I'm bringing the experts to them that they can ask their specific questions to about their specific child and get specific answers. So we're talking like behavior analysts, speech therapists, occupational therapists, pediatricians. That happens in there. And then we have like mom's night in once a month. So we hang out on Zoom together, and we have book club, and I have the Autism Accelerator Bootcamp course, and they get to listen to my audiobook for free as members of the Infinity Mom Club. So I just packed it full of so much that I think that moms would find valuable. And we have a great time in there. So that's the Infinity Mom Club.
My gosh, it's genius. Amber, it's genius. And the thing that I think is so great, and again, like I know I don't have a lot of room to speak here. I mean, well, what happened to my hair there? I got a little crazy over here. Let's fix his hair. But, you know, I have 5 kids, but I have not dealt with autism. But just having 5 kids, anytime I've struggled with something as a mother, my bandwidth is nowhere. I don't have the bandwidth to go and research and figure out solutions. I don't have the bandwidth to try and figure out, okay, like, how do I find a therapist for my kid? Like, this is the problem of just being a mother. Then throw on, you know, an autism diagnosis, and I can't imagine that there wouldn't be any bandwidth to do the research, to find things. And so I love that you've brought it all together so that it's just there for them and they don't have to go try and figure it out. It's already here. And then to be able to have experts come in. I mean, this is so brilliant what you've created. Anyone who's listening right now, if you know a mother, or you are a mother, or you are a father, or you know a father whose child has autism, I'm highly suggesting you go towards this space, or that you show them this membership, because life is just too damn hard to walk it alone, throwing on top of trying to navigate autism without any resources. Everyone needs to know about this. So how do they even find out? Like, where could we send them so that they could learn more about this?
I make it pretty easy. So I ended up essentially building a company around this book. So it's called Autism Savvy. So autismsavvy.com. And then on social, like TikTok and Instagram, I'm at Autism Savvy.
Perfect. Okay. And that will be in our notes as well. But this is me saying, go, like, run, share this. Let's not have parents be drowning while they're also holding their babies. Oh, yes. I feel that, you know?
Yeah.
I just think what you've done is so powerful. So what I would love is if you could share a message to anyone who's listening right now, who maybe feels like they're drowning while trying to hold their kids. Like, what could you speak into them right now?
Oh, man. I'm just going to say, like, take my hand. I'm not a big organization. Like, I'm just a mom like you, or find someone like me who's walked this path, and know that autism isn't as scary as you think, that you have so much to hope for. Having an autistic child doesn't mean that they're not capable of having beautiful lives, or that you won't still have a joyful life. We just have to make some pivots, and everything can still turn out pretty dang good. So just have hope for that. That would be my message.
I love that. I love that. Have a hope. Have hope for a future that could possibly be better than they even imagined. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a piece that I'm hearing of like, there's something that happens when we get thrown off our path, where we lose the hope of a future that we thought we were going to have. Can you speak about that? Like the grief of losing the hope of a future that you were expecting.
It's so real. It's so real. And when your child is diagnosed with autism, you might feel like you were handed a death sentence. You're like, oh my gosh, all these dreams I had for this child. I don't know if they're going to talk. I don't know if I'm going to hear the word mom. I don't know if they're going to go to college. Are they going to be bullied? You're going to have all these things that, it's not what we planned. We dream up all of these beautiful dreams when we're carrying that baby in our belly. And it is hard. And I think you have to let yourself process those feelings. But here's something, I think I actually talk about this in the book. It's like, yes, but having an autistic child, it doesn't mean that they're not going to have a beautiful, joyful life. There might be challenges, but guess what? Having a typically developing child also is no guarantee of a perfect, joyful life. How many of us have typically developing kids that end up with depression, suicide ideology? They have an injury, they lose a leg, they have a heart defect. Like, raising children comes with risk, and there's no guarantees anywhere, So it's just like, but I just think that it's a mindset shift that if you're like, oh my gosh, you're right. Like, having an autistic child doesn't mean that they're going to have this terrible future, or that I am. And having a typically developed child it means the same. Like, it can go either way no matter what. So like, we're really not that special because our child's autistic. Like, being a parent comes with these same risks. And the bottom line is, we just have to learn how to pivot with grace and just find where you don't feel alone along the way.
Yeah. That's like the best sentence ever. Like, parenting comes with risks. Is that what you said? You're like, I was like, the best. So. It was like, oh my gosh, it's the best sentence ever. Like, it's so true, right? Like, to raise children is risky. I mean, we've got drugs. We've got, it's like, this is like a landmine every damn day, you know?
100%.
And so I think you naming that really takes off the pressure of like, it's just risky that we decided to become parents.
Yeah. And, I would like to share a little story on this subject.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So we adopted our first 4 children one by one as babies. Okay. 3 of them are from the same birth mom. So there's 2 birth moms, 4 kids. I had them within 4 years. So grateful. All I wanted to be was a mother. Okay. Then along the way, I could just never get pregnant. My husband has spinal cord injury. I have endometriosis. I wouldn't get pregnant and miscarry. I just literally would never be pregnant. And this went on for a long time. We tried IVF off and on. Well, probably the average listener is like, you had 4 kids. Like, I'm sure that's plenty. But I had this thing in my soul where I was like, I'm missing one. I'm missing one little girl, and I will call her Mallory. And I would try adoption, and I would try foster, and I would try IVF, and nothing would work to get her here. It was like this whole thing for a really long time. Okay. So anybody who's been through IVF, it is like going to battle. Like, it's not for the faint of heart. The IVF sucks emotionally and physically. And it's not a guarantee. No pregnancy is, but when you're paying $10,000, $15,000 for a chance, you really hope that it works. So anyway, I finally get pregnant with Mallory and have her 20 years into my marriage. 20 years. And not only that, I end up with extra embryos in the freezer. I never thought that would be the case. Like, they would always die off. So now I have my miracle baby, and I have 4 embryos left in the freezer. And I agonize because now I'm almost 40. And I'm like, but she's going to grow up like an only child. My older kids are teenagers to young adults at this point. And I don't want her to grow up like an only child, but I don't ever want to put myself through that again. I don't want to hope for that ever again. And it was this whole thing I went through, like, what do I do with those embryos? Do I try? Because it could work on the first time, or the second, or the third, or the fourth, or none of them. That could take me 4 more years to get through. Like, I could have a stillborn. I could have miscarriage after miscarriage. I'm old now. Or what do I do? Destroy them? Donate them to another couple so someone else can raise my baby? Like, none of them seemed like great options. I had to get to a point where I said, there is no reward without risk. And I had to get to the point where I said, I'm going to try for this baby, and it might not work out. And she might have health issues. And either way, I am going to be okay. Took me a long time to get to that moment. And so I went for it. And on the very next treatment, they put in this embryo and it took right away. That was January of 2020. We know what happened that year, but I had another baby. In 19 months later, she ends up with an autism diagnosis. I would have told you that's the worst thing that could ever have happened.
Yeah.
It's not. Like, I am okay. She's okay. She's more than okay. All of my kids are okay. Like, there's hard things, but there's no reward without risk. And my worst fear came true, essentially, and I'm still okay. I just think that's a big lesson.
It's a powerful lesson. And what an extraordinary story of resilience on your part.
Oh,
it's a journey.
You.
It's a journey that you walked.
Okay.
And it's created you to be this leader, to be able to help people. And it's just so interesting. This idea of like our worst fears coming true. And then you being like, oh, and we're fine. It's like just speaking that into people right now. Like maybe somebody's afraid that their kid has autism and they don't want to go get diagnosed because they don't want to find out. And you just speaking that over them right now is probably helping them have peace. Like, everything's going to be okay.
Everything is going to be okay. And some kiddos do require a lot of support for their whole life. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. It does, at least 1/3 of the time. And these parents struggle so much, and that is so valid. They're still okay. They still wouldn't trade their kid. They still adore their child. So I'm grateful for you letting me share my thoughts today.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm grateful that you're here. I had this really powerful experience this week. I went on a retreat. I waited to be silent for 2 days. I'm a bit of a talker. So that was a real challenge that maybe I broke a few times. Like maybe I couldn't actually abide by the rules completely. But there was this insight that came to me when I was silent. And it was really fascinating because there was 9 of us women there. And if no one spoke, we didn't know where to go. So the leader would take a gong and gong this sound, and we would know to follow. And it was like this thing of like, so as leaders, if we're not sharing, if we're not teaching, if we're not speaking what God has told us to speak, then like no one really knows where to go. There's like power in us sharing. And there's power in what you've done. And there's power in your words. And there's power in what you've created. And it's because those who are lost and struggling and drowning and don't know where to go, when they can hear your voice, when they can hear what you've created, it gives them a place of safety and a focal point. And that lesson that I learned this week, like it changed me. It was like, no, this is why we are guided to share.
Yeah, I think that's so good. Yeah. That was insightful.
Yeah, it's profound for me. So you have created this work because there are many who need to hear. They need to hear where to go. They need one voice is going to be like, hey, I figured some things out. I've gathered the experts. I've brought this for you. So those who are listening, don't walk the path alone. Whether you get support with Amber or you go somewhere else, but like for the love, don't do this alone. Right?
Yeah.
And grab her book. It's on Amazon. We'll link it in our show notes. Why don't you show it one more time and say the title one more time so people can look that up right now?
Beautiful. It's called Not Atypical Motherhood. But the word atypical is like, it's not what you think if you're just listening. It's ATYPICAL, Not Atypical
I love
Motherhood.
it.
Yeah. Thank you so
I love
much.
that. I love that. And go follow her. She's phenomenal on social media. You are such a great, what is the word? I mean, I love watching your videos. They captivate me. Every time I see one of your videos, like I literally have to sit and watch. Like you catch me, and you're really,
Aw.
really good at what you share. So everyone go follow her. It's Autism Savvy. And Amber, I know I'm your publisher and I helped you write a book, but I'm also your friend. And you showed up for me on a day when my marriage was falling apart. In Arizona, I'll always remember you just showed up for me that day in that car. And I just want people to know, like, yeah, you're a leader and you're brilliant and you're an amazing businesswoman. You're also like an extraordinary human. And I just like feel really lucky to know you. And I'm like so grateful you showed up for me during a time when my whole world was falling apart.
You're one of my favorites. I sure love you.
Same. So with that, my dear Amber, I want you to take a nice deep breath in. And I want you to take your eyes into your heart. And if there's a message that you can share today as we leave, what would be the most important message that you share?
How about just like keep your chin up? Everything is going to be okay. And trust your gut more than anything.
Powerful. Beautiful. Amber, thank you for writing this book. Thank you for being this leader. And thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me. It was so fun.
Yes. And as we leave, I always like to leave one message. The message is just so loud to me today is that don't walk alone. Whether you have a child with autism or not, don't walk this life alone. Find the people who will see you, who will hear you, who will guide you, who will hold you. Because life is not meant to be alone. And there are so many who will come around and hold you. With that, my friends, I will see you on our next episode of I Was Born to Do This.